Hi, thanks for joining me on Chapter 10. Now that we have familiarized ourselves with the general characteristics and microanatomy and physiology of the skeletal muscles, we are ready to take this knowledge and move on further. But before that, remember from our last chapter that there were three main types of muscle tissue: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle. And it is the skeletal muscles that we will be focusing on now. Remember that these were the large muscles that you think of when we talk about the muscular system, and the muscles that move the body and body parts. We also talked about the characteristics of muscle tissue. Remember, all muscles shared these four main characteristics. They are executable, contractile, extend, and have elasticity. And then finally we looked at muscle functions. Remember that there were four main ones: generating movement, giving our body posture, stabilizing joints, which happens all the time, and heat production. But of course we could list a bunch of other ones too. So this all should have been revision from the last lecture. And as I said, on this chapter, we will review a number of skeletal muscles, with our focus being on identifying the major ones and understanding their start and end points, as well as their functions. That is, what type of movements they can generate. And as I was preparing this talk for you, I was thinking that there are over 600 muscles in the body. And of course, I realized that we will not be able to cover all of these. So what we tend to do in my field is that we group these together. For example, by location and/or function. And then review them in this format. It makes the task at hand much more manageable. So you do not need to memorize each one of these 600, but you will need to know the most important ones. And why, you might ask? And here is the answer. Just like medical terminology gives us a shared language that we can use and avoid mistakes and communicate more efficiently, or just like the skeletal system and knowing different bones and their parts gives us the very foundation that most of the body is built on, then just similarly, muscular system not only is a huge part of the human body, but also gives us many of the surface landmarks that we use when identifying structures and treating the body. And like I have told you before, my background is that I am an anatomist by trade. So what do? Well, we are very good at naming things of the body. And unfortunately, if that is not your passion, this is something that you will have to learn, at least to some extent, to pursue further your goals of a career in medicine or sciences that involve human body. So I guess that the next natural question is how to study these muscles that we will be looking at. Well, I have a few tips or recommendations, but again, find your own learning style and capitalize on that. These are only suggestions. So, as often is the case in anatomy, I find that simply looking the name of a structure gives us a wealth of information on the structure that we are looking at. Therefore, consider the name a bit more than just memorizing it. What does it tell about the size or shape or function or location of the muscle? And so on and so on. There is a good chance that the name alone will guide you far. The other thing that I would recommend is to not only stare at the textbook or tables that you study, but actually take a while to actually identify the muscles that we are talking about. Find it on a diagram or color it in there or label it or try to work out where it is in your own body. Or if you are lucky enough to have an access to the models of musculature of a human body, use them. I am trying to get all campuses and access to some models in the library, so also those students who do not attend traditional classroom sessions have an access to these. But this is taking me a while to arrange, so if you find yourself wanting to do that, let me know and I will do my best to arrange you an access to these. You are just as important to me and all of us as our face-to-face students. So, like I said, use diagrams, for example. And I have made these that you can see here available for you. Some of my students like to use them and label and color muscles as they review those. What else? I would also encourage you to think of the function of a muscle. Do not just learn where it is at, but think, why do we have it? What sort of movements may it help us to make? This is just as important as finding the structures. I want you to also know what they do. So I will be adding to the end of this video a link to the movements that we discussed. Consider what movements does this muscle allow us to do. And finally, this is probably my favorite piece of advice. You likely have all the structures that we study in human anatomy and physiology classes. Especially with muscles, try to find them in your own body, or at least as much as possible from external gross anatomy. And act out these functions as you study these structures. Feel the muscles contracting under your skin. Of course, if you have a really good friend or a partner, you can study these muscles in this way of their body too. Ask them to do movements and study the muscles as they contracts and relaxes. Again, thinking what sort of movements it allows us to make. So those are some tips to get us started. And before we are going to move on to look at individual muscles around your body, I think it is a good time for us to review some general concepts in the next video. In that one, we will be looking at the general conventions and rules for naming skeletal muscles and what their fascicle arrangement and shape can tell us. I will see you in that video.